Welcome to the Becoming babyREADY podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. All too often when we become parents, we feel like we're functioning in a silo, and it's so important to not only create community, but if we have a partner, to make sure that we stay connected to them. I was really grateful to have the opportunity to speak with Lara Stewart Panko today and to have the chance to have you learn from what they have to say about the connections we can make with our partners and the value of having a therapist in your corner. We also talk about birth trauma and how it can rear its ugly head even decades after a birth, and it's never too late to get the support you need. Welcome, everyone. I just want to take a moment to welcome Lara to the show and to give her the opportunity to spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about the work that they do. Welcome. Tell us about yourself.
Hi there. Thanks, Sam. So I'm a birth and family professional, which is a big umbrella term for a few different hats that I've worn over the years, and some of those hats I continue to wear. So historically, I was a birth doula for almost 30 years. I was a postpartum doula for 17 years. So those two pieces I no longer do. I've been a childbirth educator for 15 years. That continues. So Hypnobirthing Hamilton is my business for childbirth education, and I rent some birth pools through that as well. But my main work right now is as a social worker. So I'm in private practice providing counseling and psychotherapy for adults, so individuals, couples, or more. And a lot of that relates to the perinatal time period, but I also have a lot of experience with end of life as well. So I'm a trainer for an international end of life organization. So approaching end of life as well as working through grief along the way, including afterwards. And and also with my counseling services, I do other aspects of mental health as well. So kind of depression, anxiety, trauma, lots of trauma work in the mix. Mm-hmm. And I'm trained as a couples therapist specifically. And so do evidence-based couples work as well.
Wow, that's a lot of hats. You're constantly changing them, but one probably blends beautifully into the next, I would think.
Yeah, I've really found over the years it's been lovely to get to pull a whole bunch of resources together from various fields. And in some ways, I like to say that I can offer a wraparound service for families. Mm-hmm. So starting, preconception all the way through. And then sometimes, we are at the point where we're expanding our family, but then we have a loved one that's also going through end of life. It's surprising how often those two things actually coincide.
That's true.
And in some ways, the start of life and the end of life, they have a lot of parallels. So it's been a joy and a privilege, and I've grown a lot over the years in being able to pull from different fields.
How does the work that you do specifically help members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community grow their families or start their families? Like, what are some of the kinds of conversations that you might have with those individuals that are perhaps different than their cisgendered heterosexual peers?
Sure. So as a member of the community, that lived experience, right? There's really no substitute for that. Yeah. And over the years, I've trained in fertility modalities. So sometimes that's a bigger piece to things for families in our community. And also too, there's that added layer of the systemic things we have to navigate, right? Mm-hmm. Of marginalization, of, often being put in a position where we have to educate, where we are actually trying to get the services, not be providing services. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the conversations I'm having with folks is really strategizing of what matters to them, what's the kind of service that they're looking for, and how can they stack the odds in their favor that that's how they're going to be met. And then if there's anything where they feel more vulnerable, what are some things we can put in place that are protective? Right? So even going, okay, I don't have to totally think on the fly. We've got some ideas of if somebody did this or said this, these are the responses that we're going to aim for. Sometimes when stress kicks in, we can't always access those plans, but it can just be a comfort. So there's less anticipatory anxiety as well.
Oh, for sure. That makes a huge amount of sense. Are there things that you might look for being a member of the community and working in the capacity that you do, that your clients would perhaps argue makes you better suited than other practitioners who are not part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community?
Mm-hmm. Well, in my personal experience, so beyond my professional training experience, in my personal experience, in some ways, I'm a little bit of a bridge. So I identify as gender fluid and pansexual. I'm also polyamorous. And so I have 2 partners. And so one of my relationships looks like a cis-het relationship, and the other one is a queer relationship. And so in that way, I get to see things in the different perspectives and how I'm even treated differently depending on which partner I'm with, and where we are and who we're with. And in that way, I feel like I can kind of give folks warnings or just like, here are some risks in certain scenarios based on what I see. And also too, in terms of being a bridge, if I'm, say, advocating on behalf of clients, so I'm communicating with another professional, then if those professionals are more likely coming from a cis-het lens, then I know better what I need to say to them, what needs to get across, and how to do it in a way that is really taking a family into account.
Yeah, that we need to feel heard and listened to, right? In all of our facets of life, whether it's professional or personal. So that's really important. So you've been there and you've done that. When you went through the process, were you ever made to feel like you were the other?
So my kid is 20. So that we have to put that in the cultural context of things look different 20 years ago in Ontario. In being pansexual, I say that depending on who I'm with, there's been some erasure, right? And there's privilege in passing, for sure. I acknowledge that I get to enjoy privilege at times. And sometimes it feels anything but privilege, that I'm not seen as who I am. So remind me the question. I've just lost the thread of the question.
Were there times when you were made to feel the other?
Yeah. So, and sometimes it'll be, even if I'm cis-het passing in moments, and so the person I'm interacting with sees me that way, they might make a homophobic or transphobic statement, and I'm going, okay, am I going to take this on today? How am I feeling today? What is my capacity, right? So there'd be moments like that. And then on the flip side, sometimes when I'm looking like a cis-het person, then being in the queer community, there's some other stuff there where maybe people don't feel so safe around me. Meanwhile, I'm like, no, I'm totally safe. So there's that in that way. And then also for my kid is also non-binary. And so over the past 20 years, watching the cultural shifts that have been happening. So in some ways, I felt I was one of those parents that was early on where I was being supportive of my kid in gender expression from the get-go before they were able to identify. Right? And kind of watching backlash at times from other folks that weren't so ready to be progressive. It's funny that we have to say that that's progressive, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sadly, I do.
There's definitely been moments where othering has come into play. Yeah.
Now, when you went through the process and became a parent, and recognizing again, my children are similarly aged to yours, so I mean, I can appreciate how things have changed, and for the most part, for the better. I don't want to say that it's a blanket statement that things are great. We've got a ways to go, but we're taking steps in the right direction. Do you feel, and again, I recognize there's probably some bias. I've asked you to participate in the show. You've agreed to do it, so you must see some benefit for it. But do you personally think that there would have been something that you would have garnered and really received well from a show like this when you were going through the process?
Sure. I can answer that question, but maybe a better answer is when I think of my current clients that are members of the community that are moving into parenthood. And absolutely, because I think there's no substitute for community. There's just no substitute for community. And, you know, we hear so much, it's like cliche at this point that it takes a village.
Right.
Cliches are cliches for a reason. The village is fractured. The village is fractured for everybody. You know, for everybody. And so if we can at least take away the layer of I don't need to fight against transphobia or homophobia, if I can at least be with safe, supportive people that understand that part of my being and that part of our family and some of the things that we might be navigating just by virtue of that, wow, doesn't that make life easier? Right?
Absolutely. You would think that that would absolutely be true.
Yeah. And to be able to go to, you know, parent and baby activities that maybe this is designed for our community, let's say. So again, I don't have to wonder, you know, is that person safe? Can I reveal that, you know, my partner is this person or that, right?
Yeah,
so yeah,
100%.
There's already enough stress in parenthood. We don't need more from our social interactions when we're just trying to take care of ourselves. So for sure, there's that. And I also think that parents across the board, regardless of identity, you can never get enough support.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So for a show like this, where yes, it's all members of the community as professionals participating, awesome. And the actual services we offer are quite valuable as well, right? And even something, say, with the counseling and psychotherapy I do, because it's queer inclusive, right?
Right.
There are things, okay, so here comes out a little bias, if everybody will forgive me on this one. And my one partner jokes about, you know, if you aren't doing something pro-social, are you even queer, right? And it's because we go through stuff, right? And it sensitizes us. And I know that's again a blanket statement. However, and so I love when I get to do work with queer families that we often go into places that cis-het families won't go. And there's beauty in that, and there's power in that. And in some ways, I feel like, you know, the personal is political. That's always going to be the case. And so for each individual, each couple, each family, in doing what is just, what feels right for them, what feels empowered and healthy, this is actually how we're gonna change society. And so I feel really honored and privileged to support people in their process of that.
Yeah, no, I fully agree.
Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. It's Sam from babyREADY. If you have been listening to this podcast, then you know that the focus is to help you find answers to questions you didn't even know you had. And now you get to do it in person. On Saturday, June 8th at the 519 in Toronto on Church Street, I am hosting an in-person event where you get to come and listen to different people speak about the work that they do to help members of the queer community start or grow their families through parenthood. For more information, visit my website, www.babyready.info.
There's one quick thing I want to spend just 1 second asking you about, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you about it, so hopefully I'm not putting you on the hot seat. But it's something that I say I fear, and I say that I fear it because I see it to be true with many individuals that I speak with. The rates of birth trauma within the community being higher, which isn't to say that it doesn't take place in the cishet community, but within the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, I see birth trauma as being something that's at a higher rate. Is that something that you are capable of or feel is within your wheelhouse to support people through? Because I do think that people need to know, even prenatally, where they can go to find that support afterwards if they need it. And not, I fully understand, and anybody watching, please understand, I'm not suggesting that I expect people to experience it, but if it does, I want people to know where they can find support too.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that you're putting this out there, even though it's a very difficult topic.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the rate of occurrence is tragic, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And so yes, the short answer is yes. I do a lot of birth trauma work, and when you're talking about thinking about it prenatally, the particular brand of childbirth education I do is evidence-based to reduce the incidence of trauma, regardless of the actual circumstances of the birth experience.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's also important when we're talking about trauma in general. So we're talking about trauma, not complex trauma, which is its other thing. Complex trauma has a lot more to do with relationships. Okay. Ongoing relationships. If we just talk about trauma, which would be the umbrella birth trauma would go under, a person could develop PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result from a traumatic birth. But lots of folks don't develop PTSD from it, but they would still say that felt traumatizing. Okay. Yep. And so that's still really worth processing.
Sure.
Okay? For any of us, even if we have an amazing birth experience, no trauma to be found, it's so important that we integrate that experience, right? It's a peak life experience. It's life-changing.
100%.
Here's a weird little factoid. They found people that gave birth, those later on in life, if they had dementia, those were some of the last memories to go.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It goes really deep, right?
It does.
There's a lot of things going on in the birth process,
yeah.
Including with cesarean birth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're thinking about a challenging or traumatic birth experience, not only is it important for the birthing person to process that, but also their partner, because their partner is usually present.
Sure.
Right? And also sometimes what I'll observe is partners have very different perspectives. So the birthing person is reporting trauma. Their partner is like, it wasn't that bad. And so, whoa, that can be a really difficult thing for a couple to navigate, particularly for the person that is reporting that something was traumatic, because to then feel, disconnected from their partner. Ouch.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's it in a nutshell. But sometimes I'm even providing coaching to partners where it's like, how do you support a loved one who is having a tough time with things? Because sometimes I've also seen well-meaning partners do things that actually cause harm in trying to help. That, oops, that's actually not going to be helpful. So yes, if anybody that's hearing this right now has questions, and there's no time limit, by the way. I have done birth trauma work with people that birthed 20 years ago.
Sure, 100%. Like you say, those memories run deep and they affect virtually every breath we take for the rest of our lives once we've become a parent. However we've become a parent, that our lives have changed irrevocably. And generally, usually that's a good thing, right? But it doesn't mean that it hasn't changed.
Sure. And a couple more things I want to add on that in case it's helpful for anybody. I personally experienced birth trauma and I had PTSD as a result of my birth. I'm smiling about it like it's a good thing, but I'm saying here's how it can be.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did actually need to step away from birth work for 2 years after the birth of my kid, because I was like, I cannot be around this stuff. Right. And now I'm right in there like a dirty shirt. So healing can happen. And then the other thing for us to know about trauma is there's something called post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is when we're able to take really difficult experiences and be genuinely, legitimately healthier on the other side because of it. not sugarcoating, not just reaching for a silver lining, because come on, put on a happy face. That is not what I'm talking about. No toxic positivity. I'm saying legit that is in the realm of possibility, in case that gives anybody hope to hear that. It's real.
I love that. I love that. Are there any topics, things that we haven't talked about that you were really hoping that we'd take a moment to discuss today?
Ooh, I could talk all day about lots of different things. I think if there's one thing I could get across to folks in having a little bit of a platform on right now, is to do the very best that you can to honor yourself, to be truthful about what matters to you, what you want, what you need. Do what you can to communicate that to the people that could have an impact on things. And sometimes we get really scared to speak up about that stuff, right? Yeah. If I take the risk and put it out there, these are my preferences, this is what I want, these are my needs, am I going to be crushed if the response is not favorable? Am I going to be judged? Am I going to be marginalized even further? Am I going to be characterized not just as a human being that has wants and needs, but like, oh, look at that so-and-so, and then, you know, that some slur comes at me and I'm judged, oh, this is why I have a need. So yeah, there are risks in that, but I would encourage you to do what you can to kind of refute any mistreatment like that by advocating for yourself and not abandoning yourself. And sometimes one thing, a workaround that I find is helpful, particularly for people that have been socialized as females, that there's a training of don't ask for what you want, put yourself at the bottom of the list, everybody else's needs matter more. When you're a parent, your kid comes first. Everybody matters. Parents' well-being absolutely matters, right? We don't want to be compromising that excessively because of a child's needs. However, if it helps you to go, I'm going to speak up and ask for what I want and need, because if I do, I will be able to parent better. Sometimes that's the workaround, particularly if you're pregnant, because when you're pregnant, you and your baby are a unit. And that can also be true sometime into the postpartum period. Right? So by default, anything that benefits you automatically benefits your child. Okay, so I'll just drop that one there.
No, I love that. And I do feel like if we are honoring ourselves and respecting our own needs, wants, wishes, and our children see that, then they learn that it's okay for them to do the same, but they also learn that there has to be some give and take, that it can't always be all their needs and wants and wishes without also being sometimes some of ours. So it's learning how to respect one another as a unit as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And even for partners to be modeling that, right? Of expressing care for one another.
Yeah. What is the best way for people to be in contact with you should they want to reach out? And you do virtual consultations as well as in person, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, because of the pandemic, right? Like lots of stuff has gone online. So a lot of my childbirth education, the group classes are all online. For private classes, I do both online and in person at this point. And I hope we get to continue along with that. And then for my counseling work, I do mostly online through a secure platform. So it's not Zoom, but it's very similar to Zoom. And I can do in person in the Hamilton, Burlington area if it is a postpartum scenario. So sometimes that's easier if you have a little one. And also for parents to know that if childcare is a barrier, you can attend counseling and psychotherapy appointments with your child around. Not optimal, right? It's a little bit harder to completely focus on your own stuff. But sometimes that's the best we can do. And you know, something is better than nothing in terms of care. And I do, for counseling and psychotherapy, I offer a free 15-minute phone call. And during that phone call, we would just be assessing a goodness of fit, because the research shows when it comes to counseling, the effectiveness of that counseling, about 50% is attributed to the rapport between a therapist and a client. So you really need to feel comfortable and feel that, yep, we would work well together on both sides. And if it isn't a good fit, I'm very happy to make referrals to more appropriate providers or services in the community. So yeah.
So how do they find you?
Fast, how do people get in touch with me?
No, that's all good. It's all good. No, but what you've said is really important. So I take away not from that, but I do want them to know how they can find you.
Sure. So if it's related to prenatal education, that would be hypnobirthinghamilton.com. And if it's related to counseling and psychotherapy, it's just my name. It's larastewartpanko.com. And you can also find my phone number if you want to shoot me a text or give me a call directly instead of just email.
Perfect. I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of the show today. The words that you shared are invaluable, and I know that you will have provided a considerable number of people with resources that they know they can count on.
Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.